everyone. I hope you are well. I am Deanna Wolf, and I'm the Senior Consultant for Trust and Foundations at Money Tree Fundraising. I hope everyone's surviving the heat wave. Luckily, temperatures broke yesterday here in Scotland, so it's a little bit cooler. My cat is happier, and generally everything is much better all the way around. I'm here today to do our Facebook Live and to talk about to answer any of the questions that you have. I know that we posted earlier in the week and that there were some questions asked, so I'm going to start going through them right away. If you have any other questions, you can post them in the links below or in the space below on the comments from this live. We are recording, so if you don't have a chance to stay the full session, please do come back to us and you can watch it. You can rewatch the session. We're posting as well on Trust Fundraise at Trust Fundraise on Twitter, which is the Trust Fundraising Hub over on Twitter, and also on the Money Tree Fundraising LinkedIn post, our LinkedIn site. So if you want to go in and find us on LinkedIn, you can see our post and our recordings will be there. And we'll put the postings on all three sessions. Feel free during the session to ask any questions below, and I'll get to them. It may be towards the end, but I will get to them. The first one that we had was from Rosie Rebecca, and it was how to define warm trusts and how do I define warm trusts, and then what steps would I take to keep them warm, or to get them warm even. I define for myself, and there are different definitions depending who you speak with. I define warm trusts as trusts I've already had a relationship with. So ones I've sent applications to, and whether definitely that we've received funding from them, if it makes it warm. We match their targets. We are in line with the things that they are looking for funding. And on top of that, they've given us funding and we've reported back and we're starting to build a relationship. So it's a good place. There's no guarantee with trusts and a warm donor that you're absolutely every single time going to be getting funding. Some of them will not they'll give you funding for 3 or 4 years and then they stop for a couple of years and then they'll start again. Some just look on you favorably and you don't have to go through and explain absolutely everything about yourself all over again. Keeping in mind that they're new trustees, and so they may not know you, or there's a new gatekeeper who may not know who you are, and so you do want to give enough information. The steps I would take to keep a trust warm or to get a trust so that they are warm with you is if you get funding from them. So first of all, make sure that you've hit their guidelines and you're meeting their targets and you're meeting their eligibility criteria, and what you're trying to do and what they're trying to do are in line with each other. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you are reporting back and that you're spending the money and that they gave you the way you said you were going to spend the money. Now, reporting back can be as simple as a thank you letter, and at the end of the year, a thank you letter that turns into saying that your funding helped us do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't have to be complicated for this. So stewardship, so making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, that you're meeting the conditions that you set out in your application to them, as well as the guidelines and the applications or the terms and conditions that they set for you. Yeah, that's basically the best thing, is just keep them warm. Don't ask too often. Don't get too greedy. So if I know that there's a tendency to try and up a donor each time you talk to them, and that's kind of based more on individuals rather than trust. Trust have a specific amount of money that they can give out, a specific amount of money that they want to give out, and they often will not go beyond that. I asked once and was asked to up and see if I could get a funder to give us more money. And what they said was, don't ask us. If you ask us again, we'll take away what we're already giving you. You're on our regular lists. So with trusts, to keep them warm, if you're going to increase them, have a look at the most in their accounts, have a look at the highest grant that they give out, see if they're giving that amount regularly to other people and other organizations. If they are, then chances are that you may have a little bit of wiggle room. And that's if you're asking sort of a lump sum that's just basic. if you're trying to increase them, make sure that you have, and it's not a lump sum that you're asking for, say for a core funding, and you're just asking for additional funds. Don't go up by too much, maybe £50, £100 at a time, and that's it. If you're getting £500 and the maximum they give is £1,000, then go up 500, 600, 700, or 750. Choose an amount that way and go year on year and ask it. If they say no, or if what they gave you is the same as they gave you last year, that's probably the level that they want to keep you at. So chances are, to keep them warm, don't ask for more. Trusts are playing the market as well, so they have a limited amount of money that they want to spend. Rosie Rebecca asked as well for tips about quality over quantity in their applications and how to say things concisely when you've got a short amount of time. What I tend to do is I write out the long version. So my initial application, especially if it's something for a project I'm going to be sending multiple times, I will I will write the whole program out. And instead, if I want a 2-pager, often my initial first document is 5 or 6 pages, and then I whittle it down. So I try and come down by a page or half a page at a time. And that is about making things clearer. Once you've got it all down on paper, it's easy to edit. It's easier to edit than it is to compose. So go in, write everything you want to say, do the full treatment of the project, all the details that you know. As you're editing down, you can sometimes consolidate things. So 3 bullet points becomes 1 bullet point, because in fact those 3 bullet points were just similar examples, and you can combine them. So instead of 6 lines, it's now 3 lines. Take out the word that. We say that a lot more than we should be writing that, the word that, THAT. Go through, read the sentence out loud, and find out if it, often you don't need to put it in. You can say the sentence, and you can take out the word that and reduce it. Sometimes what you're saying that, and really what you mean is which. So it's generally some editing tips for being concise and being quality. I would go long version, cut it down to the smaller version. Go down to, maybe if you're writing 6 pages, write it down and try and aim to get to 3 in the first instance, and then aim to get to 2, and then aim to get to 1, and then aim to get to half a page. There are a lot of funders now are coming into having very, very tiny application forms. They want 1,000 characters. If you've got a 6-page proposal and you've got to bring it down to 2 answers of 1,000 characters, which is the case with the Steel Charitable Trust the other day when I was writing it for one of our clients, it's tough. It's very, very doable, but it's tough. And what you have to do is take it from the big version to the small version, to the medium to small, and work it down that way. And that's what I would say. A lot of funders right now are probably still oversubscribed. After COVID, there was a general sense that, trusts are giving out money, so they'll continue to give out money. Trusts are giving out money. They're going to continue to give out money, but they are also very, very clear that they got overwhelmed and were vastly oversubscribed during the lockdown periods of the last 2 years. And so in 2008, we saw that funders who were normally getting, say, 100 applications, were now getting 500 or 1,000 applications. That's the recession in 2008. I would say that it's probably equally gone up massively. A lot of the funders are saying that their success rates have gone from 1 in 10 to 1 in 20 or 1 in 15. That's really, really tough. So you don't want to give them, if they've got 1,000 applications to write, don't put in a 5-page proposal unless you're asking for an awful lot of money, and 5 pages is what you're looking for. I know Garfield Weston's still looking for 10, but they're very clear about what they want in that 10 pages, and it's a maximum of 10 pages. Wolfson is the same thing when you get to them. For the bigger ones, when they're asking for a lot, they're very clear about how much they would like. The small ones could be getting 1,000 applications, and it's 3 volunteer trustees who meet once a year. They'd have to read through 1,000 applications. Don't make it tough on them. So my advice on quality over quantity is go for quality rather than lots of pages and lots of pictures. Make sure that your pictures, if you've got a picture, it should take the place of 1,000 words. basically, well, maybe 250 words. Just remember that the pictures that you put into a proposal should be worth the and tell exactly the same story and a better story than that space if you were using that space for words. So keep the application short. Funders would prefer it probably if it's shorter. If it's longer, make sure there's a really good reason. And the amount of money you are asking for. If you're asking for 5-figure gifts, you're probably going to be doing more than 2 pages, but not necessarily. For example, Steel has a very clear application. They've got a very clear amount of money that they're looking for is a minimum of £10,000 when you put your ask in. And I'm just using that as an example right now. But that ask has a very little bit of information initially, a little bit more that you can add in. But really, they want you to keep it nice and concise. So go for concise, but to get that way, reduce your editing or edit it down. I hope that answers your question. The next one is from Victoria, and her question was, should we be doing stewardship with all the trusts that we receive funding from? The simple answer is yes. The more complicated answer is different trusts are going to require different amounts of stewardship, and that's whether a report's been asked for or not. My suggestion is always send thank you letters. Always send an update if you can. So stewardship is a different level for different funders. Somebody who's giving you £500, just because it's £500 and doesn't seem like a lot for you, it might be huge in the amount of money that they give out because they only give out £5,000 a year. So £500 is 10% of their income is going to you. That means there's potentially only 9 other funders or 9 other charities that are being asked. So my suggestion would be a thank you letter, definitely a thank you letter. Ask them if they'd like any other information. And it's going to depend on the relationship. Sometimes it's reports, sometimes it's inviting them to various things. However, if you've got a local trust that's been giving you money and you're a local small area charity, I would invite them to the things that you do because they're local. The trustees probably live in your town. So get them involved, and that's going to be that's going to be stewardship much more along the lines of what you would be doing with major donors or individuals. But nevertheless, you want to keep in mind that all the decisions are still being made behind closed doors. I hope that answers it. So yeah, stewardship for everybody, but the level of stewardship is going to depend. I worked with one charity last year, and they worked out a plan for stewardship and the levels of at what level what kind of activities would be going on. It may be worth in your organization sitting down and having a thought about, if they give this much and this is the kind of charity they are, this is the kind of stewardship we do. If they give much more, or they give a massive gift or lots of influence, then this is the kind of stewardship that they get, and these are the activities that we would invite them to or include them in. If you have it on paper, it makes it a lot easier, and you can decide, even if it doesn't necessarily fit the original criteria, actually, with this trust, having known them, this is the kind of information they want. Keep in mind as well with stewardship that funders, smaller funders at least, they don't have a lot of time necessarily. They are trustees. They have their own lives. They have their own work. They may be trust fundraisers as well, and they're just doing trustee work on the side as a portion of what they're doing. They may not have a lot of time to go through things. So keep in mind how you interact with them is going to depend a lot on their availability for that. The fourth question that we got was from Simone, and it was, should you send a trust report even if one isn't requested? And I think this relates very much to the last question. I would say potentially, and it's going to depend again. If they say no reports, then follow their guidelines. First of all, no matter what, follow the guidelines of the funder. If they say no, we don't want this, then don't send it, because it means that you're not listening to what they're asking you to do. Otherwise, with stewardship, what I would say is, and with reports, is be prepared to at least have a paragraph that says, this year we spent your money on this. It was really great. We had this kind of, it had this kind of an impact for us. Even if it's your core funding, you gave us £1,000. Thank you so much. It meant that we could keep the doors open. And we were able to work with 35 people this year, which is more than we did last year. So thank you. Reports can be really simple. They can be a thank you letter. Equally, they can be a full-on report on the funders' paperwork and their own funding applications. Generally, if they're not asking for it, I would be prepared to give something. It could be at the end of the year, you just send a thank you letter and a paragraph update. Or the other thing you can do is you put the update in your next request to them. So if you are going for regular funding from them and you apply every year, next year's application, you go in and a paragraph, or in the cover letter that you send, you include last year you gave us this much. Thanks so much. This is what we were able to accomplish. And this is a review of what we did. And it becomes a review as well as a new ask at the same time. Our fifth question is, should you send, can we offer advice for tips for applications where the funder prefers to fund projects but will consider core? This organization needs core funding, but they don't want to reduce their chances of being funded because they go for core when the funder prefers projects. Oh, that's always an interesting question. I think it's probably there's a dependency on, it depends on the funder. If you are asking for core funding, you can ask for core funding as a direct, hi, this is how much it costs us to keep us open. And that's really clear. And I think I would do that with the ones that say we give core funding. With the ones that say they consider core, or they don't say whether they do projects or core, or they're saying that they prefer to fund projects, I would package your core costs as a project. So it's got a beginning and an end date. Your core costs are very much about what you as an organization do. Without those core costs being covered, you can't do the general work that you do. So if you're a health and social care charity and you're working with children, you can't help the beneficiaries, the children that you work with, unless those other activities are going on. The core costs are covered. So my tendency when I've had this kind of situation is that I will write my application. I'll outline all the activities that we do as an organization, that whether they're projects or not, and indicate that these are the kinds of services that we offer. This is the kind of things that we want to continue doing, and make sure that we have activities for, and make sure that we've got our doors are able to be open for. When I do the application, or when I do my ask, and I always put my ask at the end, it's just the way I prefer to do things. In my ask, I will ask for funding for our costs generally, or for one of the projects that I've outlined. That means that if they are project that focused and they only want to give projects, even though they're considering core, they can direct it to you if they want to fund you for one of the projects that you've outlined. Don't necessarily put in a project that is fully funded, because it's fully funded unless it's something that goes on every year, in which case you might be able to move some funding around. I think that might answer your question. I hope it does. Basically, give them the option of covering core. Focus on your core activities and core costs covering core activities and how much it costs you to do things, and then make sure that you can cover the rest. I hope that answers the question. I'm just going to pop on and see if there are any other questions that are coming up. It's always fun when you have multiple levels of technology going on. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. There don't seem to be any other questions on there. There were a couple other questions that were asked in this week. One of them in Trust Fundraising Hub. One of them was, if a funder asks you for your income and expenditure during the last financial year, would you provide them with figures from your last audited accounts or from your draft figures from your actual last financial year, even if those are not audited or verified yet? Um, and in this case, the last audited accounts were from 18 months ago because of the COVID delays and things like that. I would put in the last audited accounts. If they're asking for your latest figures, I would ask them specifically about that. And I would say somewhere in the text, if you can, that you can provide your management accounts or your latest figures, even if they're not verified. I would go with what's verified, because what they may be doing is checking that those figures and the figures that you've put in your accounts, which are posted on Charity Commission or OSCAR or the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland, are accurate, and that you're talking about the same amount of money. I hope that makes sense. Give them more information if they want it, or in a cover letter. If you've got a cover letter, give them information and explain it there. We've just had another question that says, can I give any advice on how to create a trust fundraising strategy to prioritize all of our very long lists of possible funders, particularly for organizations with multiple projects and activity areas like universities? Oh, goodness. I think, well, a trust fundraising strategy, and it should come from the fundraising strategy, and the fundraising strategy should come from the organizational strategy. Now, the thing is, when you've got multiple funders, they're going to have multiple deadlines. They're going to have multiple areas of interest, and they are asking you to meet their interests rather than you going out and saying, hi, this is what we do. We want you to fund us, even if that's not the area that they go. So it is very much about a matchmaking game. I would have your trust fundraising strategy, have your pipeline of funders that you know, have the projects that you have, and see where there's a match. And then I would go and make your trust fundraising strategy to meet your best chances of getting that funding in. If you have a prioritized project that's really important to you, but there are no funders that are good matches for it, you can spend all your time writing applications for that and getting money in for a project that's not really fundable by trusts. And that means that you have no time to go and find the funding that you can get in. Since money from trusts is often restricted, it's prioritized to what they need the funding for and what you need the funding for, and that needs to match. When that match is good, you'll get the funding in, often, hopefully. Competition being competition, there isn't enough money going around, unfortunately. So that's going to be tight. My suggestion is, do your match before you do the trust funding strategy, or have the trust fundraising strategy be, you're going to match your the potential funders to the potential projects, and then go with a prioritization of deadlines and your chances of getting the funding in, and work that through first. Just because it's big money doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be achievable. A lot of the funders that are going for the really big grants, or a lot of the charities that are going for the really big grants that are out there, that competition is really high, and there may only be 5 grants that come out. So you have hundreds and thousands of applicants for a very small chance of getting funding in. The matchmaking is the way to do it. And I'd say that your trust fundraising strategy is to match your projects and have a priority listing of the projects that are going on, and then have a priority listing of and see where the trusts match it. If you don't have trusts that match a projects that's really high priority, but it's a good project, you may need to go to another income stream to find the funding for it. It may be better that particular project is much more fundable and of much higher interest to major donors, or to an appeal from community fundraising, or to something that would be great at an event. I hope that answers a little bit. It's kind of one of those ones of chicken and egg, and are you getting everything that you can do? So fundraising strategy, match what's doable first and what's achievable with the priorities that you have, and then go from there. I don't think there's any other questions at this point. I have, however, recently, I know we posted it in the Trust Fundraising Hub, that I was doing a conference on the cost of living crisis and how that was affecting different areas of fundraising. So in line with that, I thought I'd touch on some of in the last 4 or 5 minutes that we have, I thought I'd touch on some of the main things that I found and that I believe about how the cost of living crisis is going to affect trust fundraising. And I will say right now, I'm not an economist. I'm not a financial analyst. I'm a trust fundraiser who's been doing trust fundraising for about 20 years. So, so my best thing is saying that this is stuff that, after talking with a couple of other trust fundraisers, we found that work was gonna, that the way I'm talking about things. Sorry, it's a little bit, this is confusing having done this. This is only the third one I've done. Basically, this recession, or this cost of living crisis, is potentially going to be worse than the 2008 recession. The 2008 recession, financial restraints were put in. They haven't been put in for this one, and the current governments that we have in the UK has been dismantling some of those restraints, which means that there are a lot more difficulties. The employment safeguards for employees have changed, safeguards on banking have changed, safeguards on investing have changed. We're not starting on a high in this one, where we were in the last one, in 2008 with the recession. We're coming at it from a low, and from a life and limb crisis point after the last 2 years. Trusts have, a lot of charities have spent out their reserves if they had them, or they didn't spend them out. They were lucky and they got COVID funding, but that means that they now have reserves, and they are not necessarily going to be prioritized unless they're a really, really popular cause. They're not necessarily going to be prioritized over the charities that need the funding more. We're heading into a slightly unprecedented historically into the markets. Some things are going up, some things are going down. It's not necessarily simple from one day to the next. So I think that the volatile is the word I'd use. Volatile is the word I'd use across the board for everything. We've got very high competition, potentially low availability. Investments may or may not do well, and if they don't have the money to give, or if they don't have the money, then they don't have the money to give. And I think that trusts are not going to return to funding things that we consider wants. So organizational redevelopment, unless that is going to make you a much leaner organization, able to do more with the money that you get. They're still going to be focusing on need and making sure that people can stay alive, and that the quality of life of the people who are alive is reasonably different. We're not returning to normal. First of all, after COVID, we've now got a crisis in Parliament, and the leaders of the Conservative Party is still being chosen, if they weren't chosen this morning already. COVID is still rife, and it's still causing lots of problems. I can tell you that in the last month, a good 3 or 4 handfuls of my friends and people I know have caught COVID, sometimes very bad, sometimes not at all. Sometimes the long-term recovery is taking much longer, and that's affecting business and affecting activity. NHS and other services, including other public services, haven't recovered, and some sectors may thrive. We do have the chance to rewrite normal, though. One thing to note is that the UK economy is underperforming relative to all other G20 nations except Russia, and we've got 0% growth is expected in 2022. My recommendations are focus on health, well-being, and a basic survival focus. Revenue need is going to trump all other causes. Capital costs are going to increase. Capital projects may have lower priority, and your timelines may, because of timelines may change. Be realistic with budgets and add inflation on multi-year budgets, a minimum of 5%. I know that Beth was talking about this in a couple comments on various things on various social media channels. At least 9% for some areas, but if not, adjust it and take a really good look. Success rates may return to mid-pandemic levels, where it was warm was 1 in 8, cold or cool was 1 in 10 to 1 in 15, and cold was 1 in 20 to 1 in 25. So be prepared and prepare your managers about that. Don't expect trusts and foundations to pick up for losses in other income streams, but many more are now considering core. So if events aren't doing well, don't expect trusts to necessarily pick it up. The competition is still really high. And whether it's pre or post gift, and some funders don't want a relationship until they've given you a gift, start developing those relationships. That's really important. It's not all doom and gloom, though. I would plan for the worst, but hope for the best. And I would adopt best practice approaches and processes and aim for top quality whenever possible. It's all speculation, and we're in a speculative industry. The decisions are made when the doors are shut, so we don't know. Well, that's it. We're a little bit over, but I'd like to thank you for tuning in today. I hope we've been helpful. It's been recorded, so that will be great. If you need to come back and look at it again, it's on our 3 platforms. So Money Tree Fundraising on LinkedIn, Trust Fundraise on Twitter, and here on Trust Fundraising Hub. And our next session will be on the 18th, Thursday, the 18th of August at 12:15 for half an hour. Bye-bye now. Thank you.